Hello, team. Welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. This is a US elections special, a daily update on what has been going on between Trump and Harris in the US elections due in November. And my goodness, there is an awful lot of content to get through. There really is. So let's get started with a section on lies. This is something that is, I think, a pervasive problem across the world of politics and indeed geopolitics. And you can talk in terms of the war in Ukraine and issues with China and Iran and North Korea. There is disinformation rife on the internet, and we are going through what's called what I would call an epistemic crisis, where we just don't know what fact and fiction, that delineation between fact and fiction. This is no more obvious than whenever Trump opens his mouth. Although, actually, I would say I know quite quite obviously what is fact and fiction. Whenever he opens his mouth, I have a feeling that it is going to lack facticity. So he had an hour-long news conference on Thursday, and that has been fact checked by NPR here, but by many others. 162 lies and distortions in a news conference, and this NPR fact check is fascinating. You know, from every single thing basically that he said is called into question. Quite incredible, and that's what he's doing at the moment. He's just spreading um, a litany of lies and half truths and twisted uh, truths, and it's just. I don't think it's doing him any favors because it is becoming pretty problematic. Take, for example, what he claimed concerning the Harris rally that took place in a hangar, and outside of the airplane that she landed in, there was a huge crowd there, and he claimed it was AI generated. So Brian Krasenstein here says today's blatant lie from Trump claiming that Harris used AI generated images is a precursor to what's to come in the next 85 days. They will flood the internet with AI generated content while questioning if actual images are themselves AI generated. And he talks about like reflections on the fuselage or on the engine or whatever, just absolute nonsense, right? To the point where he came out and released this absolute screed on Truth Social. So here, Michael Weiss says he'll be consumed by crowd size to the point of losing any and all focus his team wants him to maintain on other scores. In other words, it's working. Incidentally, there are rumors that he's going to get rid of his campaign team, or might have already done so. I don't know. Those are just rumors out at the moment. But someone says, can't make this stuff up, folks. Donald Trump is now making completely bizarre charges that Harrison Walls have fake crowds generated by artificial intelligence. And talking of this, the truth he wrote on True Social, oh my God, he is so effing insane and stupid, it makes me want to scream, says one source. This is a widely debunked, insanely dumb talking point going around on Ultra MAGA Twitter. There is a video of the event. He is so crazed and completely deranged. Okay, what's he actually said? So this is Donald Trump speaking. Has anyone noticed that Kamala cheated at the airport? There was nobody at the plane, and she AI'd it and showed a massive crowd, scare quotes, crowd of so-called followers, all caps, but they didn't exist. She was turned in by a maintenance worker at the airport when he noticed a fake crowd picture, but there was nobody there, later confirmed by the reflection of the mirror like finish on the vice presidential plane. She's a caps cheater. She had caps nobody waiting, and the scarecrow's crowd looked like 10,000 people. Same thing is happening with her fake crowds at her speeches. This is the way the Democrats win elections, by caps cheating, and they're even worse at the ballot box. She should be disqualified because the creation of a fake image is, all caps, election interference. Anyone who does that will cheat at anything. Okay, this does two things. I mean, one, it's just a rant that is an overt lie, right? It's an absolute lie. So that's your one thing. It's just obvious bonkers claim that he's moved the Overton window of what's not so much of as to what is acceptable to talk about, but as to how much you can lie, how much you can lie and think you can get away with it. But the second thing that he does here is that last sentence. This is super, super important. Anyone who does that will cheat at caps anything. What he's doing, and he's doing this an awful lot, is he's laying the groundwork for challenging the election results if it goes against him. So if Kamala Harris wins this presidential election, he will have been saying for so long that she's the sort of person that would cheat at anything, and anything being the election itself. That he would just then, he's basically giving himself a permission structure to challenge that election result. And watch out for that, because he'll be doing it an awful lot. That last sentence does a lot of heavy lifting in that whole screed. Now, he's subsequently been challenged on this claim of AI crowds. Reporters are finally grilling Donald Trump for lying about Kamala Harris's crowds being AI generated. Donald Trump is devastated that Kamala Harris is creating larger crowds than him. So this is par for the course. He's been obsessed with crowds. He's obsessed with himself, right? So for him, he has to be the biggest and best at everything, and he'll just listen to the words he uses. It's just so Trump. But it goes back to the inauguration back in 2016 when he said, I've got the biggest crowds ever, and the crowds were not that big, and it was raining, and he basically lied about the size of his crowds then. I'm sure there's some Freudian psychology in there somewhere. But he's done it recently with regard to the January 6th crowd compared to the Martin Luther King I have a dream speech. Bizarre. Anyway, listen to this.
And you said Harris's crowd sizes were AI and that there weren't people there. There's all kinds of video evidence and people who were there who have proven that false. Can you tell us about why you made that claim?
Well, I can't say what was there, who was there. I can only tell you about ours. We have the biggest crowds ever in the history of politics. We have crowds that nobody's ever seen before.
We have crowds that nobody's ever seen before. People have seen stadiums or arenas or small venues or medium-sized venues full of people. Just stop saying we got crowds. I was listening to Tommy Lauren against who's one of Trump's acolytes, having a bit of a debate against Tim Miller, and she used a Trump phrase that just infuriates me. We've got people coming into this country with languages we never heard of before. We've literally heard of every language that is being used at the border in the US. What does it even mean? Languages you never heard of before? Yes, we have. We literally have. I know there's hyperbole, but there's also just outright lying. What is also frustrating here is what he first says.
Well, I can't say what was there, who was there. I can only tell you about ours. We have the big.
I can't say what was there or who was there, but you literally just have. You literally have just made that accusation. So now you're essentially lying about your own claims, right? About your own ability to make those claims. I don't trust this. This man is not trustworthy, and he's not got the biggest crowds ever. He's got smaller crowds than Kamala Harris, and that is evidenced on video. Just go and have a look at the videos of the rallies recently. Anyway, he then has the gall to say, all caps, everything about Kamala is fake. Donald Trump says that, shouting on Truth Social. Ron Filipkowski points out that says a guy with 4 hair transplants, bronzer makeup, and a girdle who pretends that he is still together with his wife. Ouch, that's painful. And we have this. So this is about Vance being a bit of a fake person. Let's listen to JD Vance.
Different set of policies to one audience and a different set of policies to another audience. And I think that's what President Trump is getting at. This is a fundamentally fake person. She's different depending on who she's in front of.
With respect, you changed your position on an important thing, which is Donald Trump.
Of course I did.
And so why are you not a chameleon?
She presents.
So he says that JD Vance is saying that Kamala Harris is a chameleon, that she's changed her position on important things. And Dana Bash says, yeah, you've changed your mind on whether you think Trump is Hitler or not. And yeah, Of course I did. Okay, well, that's double standards then. But there you go. Then, I mean, goodness me, I could play you this whole fact check of a North Carolina speech. So Donald Trump's just done a North Carolina speech, and that has been called out for a whole set of lies as well. This is what's his name, Dale, um, on CNN giving the fact check for Trump's speech.
What stood out to you, Daniel? Yeah, so you
Daniel
did some
Dale.
of the fact checking yourself, and I appreciate that. Everything you said was right. There were a bunch of claims that I think a lot of people would question, but that are subjective or uncheckable. He claimed California, where a whole lot of people happily live, is unlivable. He claimed that we're a banana republic in a third world country. I think a lot of people would dispute that. But also a whole bunch of claims, Phil, that were just flat out false. He again said that Kamala Harris was made the border czar, put by President Biden in charge of the border. That didn't happen. In reality, she was given a much more limited immigration-related assignment tasked with dealing with the so-called root causes of migration in certain Central American countries. He repeated his claim that she's allowed 20 million people into the country. Aside from the question of her own role and responsibility, the total number of border so-called encounters under Biden and Harris is 10 million, and far from all those people were actually allowed in. That includes the people who were expelled from the country upon arriving at the border. He boasted of how good African
So that's inflating statistics by 100%.
American poverty, the poverty level was during his administration. He didn't mention it's actually fallen to a lower level, a new record, beating the Trump era record under Biden and Harris. He called switching candidates in the Democratic primary a minor form of cheating. It's not a form of cheating at all. It's allowed completely within the law and the rules. And he spoke of how the Inflation Reduction Act, he said, gave us record inflation. The U.S. has never had record inflation under Biden and Harris. Even the Biden-Harris peak of 9.1% was about a 40-year high, nowhere near the all-time high of about 23.7%. And that 9.1% number has come way down since then. It's now 2.9%. So whatever peak it reached before, nowhere near it now. And finally, he spoke of so-called very
And of course, it's worth noting that that inflation was in line with global inflation as well. So
good polls for him coming out right now and claim we're leading. He might be seeing private numbers we're not seeing, but in the national averages of public polling, he's not leading. He's now trailing. Phil?
he keeps talking about how he's got incredible poll numbers better than Kamala Harris, and it's just objectively not true. Anyway, the final one on lies here. So Trump lied about 20 times during his interview with Elon Musk, according to CNN. In particular, he said that the US allocated $250 billion to Ukraine, which European countries only allocated $71 billion. At the same time, Europe allocated about $205 billion in military, financial, and humanitarian aid to Ukraine, while the US allocated about $108 billion. So this is just so dangerously incorrect. And that fills his audience with disinformation, misinformation. Or I don't know whether it's disinformation. Does he actually know, but he purposefully is disinforming people, or does he just keep sticking? I mean, he has been corrected on this before. It's so irritating because it's flat out lying. Um, yeah. CNN at the same time notes that the US is ahead of the EU countries in military aid, which was actually allocated, but not by much, about 56.42 billion from the States and 56.35 billion from Europe. Trump's claim that the US has provided far more aid than Europe is not true. That is really, really important with regard to what I'm often talking about in terms of the war in Ukraine. Right, let's move on to that conversation with Elon Musk. And my goodness, that has received such a large amount of ridicule and harsh criticism. Be interesting to see what it's like from his own sort of acolytes and big fans, because they might have listened to it and said, "Yeah, it was brilliant. I thought he was on point," but he was slurring. He seems to. I don't know whether he's got dentures or something, or new dentures, but he had this weird speech impediment on the S's, and lots of people were apparently googling about Trump and dentures, and it was just a bizarre conversation that hasn't done himself any favors. I love this from Rex Upka. Expert political analysis of Donald Trump's interview with Elon Musk. So here's the expert political analysis. This is the craziest effing thing I've ever heard in my life, and any Republican who walks away from this with unsoiled trousers is living in a fantasy world. it was nuts. Harry Sisson saying this Trump interview is a complete disaster. He's incoherent. He's slurring his words. He can't even stay on track. This is not a man who should have access to the nuclear codes. He continues to be a threat to national security. And the Harris Walls, this is absolutely on point. And there's been this interesting switch with the Biden ticket turning into the Harris Walls ticket, the Biden Harris ticket, where he had actually the same people working on the campaign just changed the way they started speaking uh, on social media to the point where people are thinking these are different people. But I think they were just let off the leash and allowed to play around with ideas, and they have been absolutely hilarious. Some of the things they've been saying. So as Harry Sisson says, the Harris Walls campaign just released this statement in response to Trump's unhinged interview with Elon Musk tonight, and it is fantastic. So Harris Walls for immediate release. A statement on Donald Trump's interview with Elon Musk. And there's another one to come later concerning Vance that is so good. Anyway, Harris Waltz 2024 spokesperson Joseph Costello released the following statement after Donald Trump's unhinged interview with Elon Musk. Quote, Donald Trump's extremism and dangerous Project 2025 agenda is a feature, not a glitch, of his campaign, which was on full display for those unlucky enough to listen in tonight during whatever that was on X.com. I just love that. To whatever that was on X.com. Trump's entire campaign is in service of people like Elon Musk and himself, self-obsessed rich guys who will sell out the middle class and who cannot run a live stream in the year 2024. And that's because the live stream is late because it crashed and it all went Pete Tong. It all went a bit wrong. And Elon Musk sort of started blaming hackers and a DDoS attack. And then people were blaming the Democrats for sabotaging this. And then he came out with his tail between his legs today and admitted it was a problem with Twitter, with X, and not an attack after people from within X also let the cat out of the bag there. It's just anyway, Brian Tyler Cohen has a really good analysis of what went on, and he's absolutely on point, BTC, in a way that is just good to hear. It's exactly what I've been saying for some time. But anyway, listen to what he says.
He wanted to send to the American people with only 3 months to go until the next election.
And what I'm going to do, one of the first acts, and this is where I need an Elon Musk, I need somebody that has a lot of strength and courage and smarts. I want to close up Department of Education, move education back to the states, where states like Iowa, where states like Idaho, not every state will do great, because states that basically aren't doing good now. You look at Gavin Newsom, the governor of California. He's terrible. He does a terrible job. So he's not going to do great with education. Very quickly, you're not going to have a country anymore. And she'll go back to all of the things that she believes in. She believes in defunding the police. She believes in no fracking, zero. Now all of a sudden she's saying, no, I really want to see fracking. We need a man or person who's unbelievably sharp in order to stop all the nuclear danger and all the dangers that I'm talking about. And I got along with all these. I got along with Kim Jong-un. We had dinner. We had everything. And he really liked me, and I got along with him really well.
We had dinner. We had everything. And I really got along with him. And this is a dictator that blew away his uncle on an airfield with an anti-aircraft gun. This is just a terrible human who has brought misery on huge numbers of people within North Korea. I mean, Jesus.
Well, by the way, he's the absolute boss over there. A lot of people said, "Oh, do you think he will?"
That's for sure.
Let me tell you, I saw things that you don't want to know about. He is the boss. But we
let's just pause a second. This is Trump saying, I saw things you wouldn't, he's basically saying I saw him do terrible things. And he's like, he's the absolute boss in a like, I respect him kind of way. I like the fact that he's an absolute boss. He's an absolute boss because he's a dictator doing terrible things to his people and those who dissent. Just it's absolutely unbelievable. And Elon Musk is just like, yeah, for sure. Yeah, whatever, boss. Oh, you're my absolute boss. Just
had a good relationship.
And that wasn't even the weird stuff. Here's Donald Trump suggesting that Kamala Harris looks like his wife, Melania, on the cover of Time magazine.
She's terrible. But she's getting a free ride. I saw a picture of her on Time magazine today. She looks like the most beautiful actress ever to live. It was a drawing. And actually, she looked very much like our great first lady, Melania. She looked, didn't look, she didn't look like Camilla. That's right. But of course, she's a beautiful woman, so we'll leave it at that, right?
Although there was one promise that I actually am rooting for Donald Trump to keep.
And again, I told you their crime rates all over the world are going way down, which makes sense. In fact, the next time what we'll do is if something happens with this election, which would be a horror show, we'll meet the next time in Venezuela because it'll be a far safer place to meet than our country. Okay, so.
Of course, Venezuela has the worst crime rates in the world at the moment. It's another set of lies that he perpetrates.
We'll go, you and I will go, and we'll have a meeting and dinner in Venezuela because that's what's happening.
So you listen to that, where Donald Trump promises to eliminate the Department of Education in agreement with Project 2025, brags about coddling dictators, lies about Kamala Harris, and even confuses his own wife with his political opponent, and ask yourself, did Trump do anything to bring any new voters into the fold? Did he...
Right, this is where BTC is so on point. I have been talking this whole campaign about about the middle people, the independents and the swing voters. Trump has this ceiling of his own voters. He cannot win the election with just his own voters. He needs to cross over into the middle, try and attract some Democrats, try and attract some centrists, some independents, some swing voters, women, young people, people of color, all these demographics, bish bash bosh, white people, and he wants to be able to have this great pull from all of these different categories of people. He can't just rely on his core voters. And if he does that, if he just relies on them, he will not win this election. And at the moment, because he chose JD Vance, who's Trump 2.0, that brings nothing to the ticket, doesn't bring any extra voters from anywhere. Ohio's already in the bag. So why have you chosen JD Vance? They're just doubling down on all this divisive rhetoric and not bringing anyone extra to the fold. And as I keep saying, and this is what I love what BTC says here, is that you've got to think about anything that happens at the rally, in the news concerning Harris and Walz and Trump and Vance, and say, right, with what I'm just hearing, has that attracted any of these people in the middle? Has any of this done a job of bringing in those voters outside of my core electorate? And the answer is, for these interviews, where these rambling, like nonsensical interviews, the answer is, I would think no. I'd be very surprised if this was attracting anyone outside of those who are completely dedicated to him.
Expand his coalition? Is that going to finally persuade those folks on the fence? Bring out young voters, people of color, suburban women? Is the last thing these people were waiting for some unhinged insistence by Donald Trump that he loves Kim Jong-un? I just cannot wrap my head around not only broadcasting this nonsense that does quite literally nothing to expand your tent, but not even deriving some financial benefit from it. No matter how you cut it, this is lose-lose. In fact,
so basically, the other thing was he raised $1 million from this, and BTC was saying that actually that's not that impressive when you look at what Kamala Harris has raised, like day in, day out, week in, week out. It's now up to what, $500 million worth of fundraising she's achieved, and he does that and raises $1 million. Yeah, okay, but he's not attracted the right people, and as a result of this as well, because he's basically done this on Twitter. Twitter is his own competitor because he's got Truth Social, and lots of people saying that actually this is sort of he's because he's allowed back on Twitter, and he's just put his first tweet on Twitter again, which is, I think, his own advert. He's basically saying Twitter's all right, and therefore Truth Social, meh. And this is not going down well. So Trump Media, Truth Social, effectively has reported more big losses, causing the stock price to continue to tank. The company has reported $343 million losses with this year, with only 826,000 revenue in the last quarter, right? That is a tiny revenue compared to obviously those losses. That is just a massively unsustainable company, and surely it's got to fold soon. Another Trump company heading for bankruptcy. Wow. So it's not looking good for Trump media, that is for sure. Right, we'll go on to some more general ideas here. Now, the first thing he did on Twitter was produce, or not produce, but to throw out to the Twitter sphere a fairly, I don't know if slick's the right word. It's an advert he's put on there, a Trump campaign advert. Um, I'm not sure it is. It's not, again. It's not going for positivity really. But yeah, you can go and check that out. I would play it all, but it's 2.5 minutes. But yeah, so he's done that, and again, I do wonder whether he's helping to spell the end of True Social. Now, it's interesting to see the news over the last couple of days. So, unprecedented number of heat records have been broken around the world this year. There are just it's just very bad news in terms of climate. How does today's extreme heat compare with Earth's past climate? It is not looking good at the moment in terms of climate change. So the question is, now I know that a lot of Trump supporters over here in the MAGA world don't believe in anthropogenic, uh, anthropogenic climate change or global warming. They think it's part of solar cycles and so on and so forth, except it's not. Just go and look at the science. Anyway, climate change is not good at the moment. So it's going to be interesting to see how Trump campaigns on that, because again, don't think about this as some kind of ideological battle here. Don't sit back and think, well, I'm denying climate change because I don't know, it's part of my ideology. Forget what you believe, and just think, what do we need to do to attract the center ground here, and all sorts of people. And if you just bury your head in the sand and say this isn't happening, then is that the right campaign strategy to attract these people in the center, who probably are more likely to believe that climate change is real, and more likely to want to have some positive action from the American government going forward in terms of dealing with this. And I don't think Trump's position is particularly particularly clever. I mean, this is what he said.
The biggest threat is not global warming, where the ocean's going to rise one eighth of an inch over the next 400 years. And you'll have more oceanfront property, right? The biggest threat is not that. The biggest threat is nuclear warming. The biggest.
Okay, so he's thinking the biggest threat is nuclear warming, but he's kind of just a throwaway thing. Hey, you'll have more beachfront property. Trump is an idiot. The rising sea level will have less beachfront properties. Rising ocean levels will also flood the lower level coastal areas. So actually, technically, not correct either. And then he's just says stuff like this as well.
It's not wind that goes around and around. And darling, let's watch the president's State of the Union speech tonight. I'm sorry, we won't be able to do it. The wind isn't blowing, darling. We have no electricity.
I hate the fact that people laugh at this and are clapping when this is just stupid. It's just a really bad joke about how wind works in a greater picture as being part of a jigsaw of energy sources. And it's just, this guy's he's not serious. Like, I can't believe people are just seriously thinking about voting for him, but there you go.
We have no electricity, darling. We won't be able to watch tonight, but perhaps sometime during the week it will be blowing and we'll be able to get our television on it.
Absolute muppet. Yes, so as we've heard, it'll be unbelievable. Trump says one of his first acts will be to close up the Department of Education, cite states like Iowa and Idaho as examples of places that are doing well. Elon Musk says he's making a good point. But of course, the question is this attracting the people in the middle? Like, is he moving the needle in his direction by saying stuff like this, or is he just playing to the people who it doesn't matter what you say, really. You could say the opposite to that and they'd still be loving it. Now, Kamala Harris is going out to campaign on an economic plan to focus on groceries, housing, and healthcare. So, I've often talked about how Donald Trump's rallies and effectively policies are just low on substance. If you ignore Project 2025, which is just it is a policy rich platform, but it's incredibly horrific platform. And he said he's distancing himself from that, but he's not really offering much in terms of substance. He's always pretty vacuous at his rallies and just talks in real vague. I think he can only ever talk in vague generalities, and it's the biggest, it's the best, it's the greatest, or immigration is terrible. They come into our country with these languages you never even heard of, or it's the biggest, the best that you've ever seen. No one's ever done it better. Yeah, okay, brilliant. Right, stop. Just give me this nonsense, this fluff and guff. Like, give me some substance and policy information and detail, and he just doesn't do that. Whereas I think it looks like the Democrats are putting together something that appears to be more tangible and more substantive. And one of the things they're going to be looking at, so here we can say economic plan to focus on groceries. So one of the issues is that perception is more important than reality. So for over 13 months, I think 14 months now, the American average wage has been above inflation. But people still think inflation is much worse than it actually is, or is really affecting them badly, when actually the stats suggest that that isn't the case. Although there has been inflation, wages have kept above inflation. And so, but people don't put these two things together. And so there's this really interesting distortion of perception. And that is important because that does not play well for the Democrats, who can actually give you the stats and the metrics of success, economic success, that should mean that they should be a shoo-in for re-election, because the economy is traditionally one of the if the economy is going well for an incumbent government, they'll get voted back in. But it's a bit weird this time around. Perceptions are still skewed. They are lagging behind reality by some time. Now, as this source says, Republicans against Trump. Oh, I was reliably told by MAGA that President Biden destroyed the oil industry. Well, we've got news, that U.S. crude oil production has officially hit a record 13.4 million barrels per day. Daily oil production has increased by 22% over the last 4 years. Since 2008, production has skyrocketed 350% from 3.8 million barrels per day. The US is now the world's largest oil producer, exceeding Russia's output by 35% and Saudi Arabia by 38%. The US is dominating global oil production. In fact, it is producing more oil than any other country in the history of the world right now. So when Trump gets up and said, we're going to drill, baby, drill, well, actually, the US, and this is kind of against, we could go back and talk about environmental policies and how this is not good for environmental policies. But in terms of what these kind of MAGA Republicans would generally be asking for, which is this kind of stat, they're getting it under the Biden administration. You don't need Trump to come along and say, we're going to drill, baby, drill. That's happening. And you've got enough capacity with where you're already drilling to absolutely blow oil competitors out the water. But it's not just that. Good reports continue on the state of our economy, says Mark Hartling. The July inflation report is full of good news, says Heather Long. Low inflation for food and energy, and deflation for some things. So 2.9% year-on-year inflation, that's the lowest since March 2021. 1.1% for groceries overall, 1.1% gain for energy, minus 2.8% for airline prices, minus 6.2% for car rental, minus 2.8% for toys, minus 11% for used cars. Even rent is finally showing signs of cooling, 5.1% for rent. That's the lowest since March 2022. So actually, these figures are really looking good for the economy. And as Jessica Tarlov says on Fox News, the one liberal that sits in there with the five, Jesse Walters and all those other people. But she says this.
This is Donald Trump in campaign mode, and that's what Democrats want to see. They want to see someone who is up there and is going to be bragging about crowd size and saying that he had a bigger crowd than Martin Luther King Jr. So it's not actually the best day, though, for him to be doing this, because the inflation report was a good one. So we're under 3% for the first time since March 2021. It's 15 months that we've seen wage growth go over the inflation rate, which is what everyone wants to see. There was a report out that our U.S. Crude oil production is now 13.4 million barrels a day. So we're outpacing 35% ahead of Russia, 38% ahead of Saudi Arabia. And what we're seeing in the surveys about this, like in Michigan, for instance, there was a FT and the Ross
I'll show you this.
did a poll together of voters there, and they actually rated Kamala Harris as more trustworthy on the economy than Donald Trump. It was just 42 to 41, but she was trailing double digits, sometimes over 20 points behind him. So the American public is seeing a change here. They are seeing inflation cool. It's not done. 100% it's not done. But it is moving in the right direction, and that's why you're seeing such a surge for Kamala.
Absolutely. And that is, it's just, it's all coming together for Kamala Harris and her campaign. And I think, I don't know. I get the sense that Trump's in a bit of free fall, and doesn't really have the substance to go on, and so therefore he just lies. But there you go. And with talking about the economy more generally, this has got him in a bit of trouble. Trump in a bit of trouble. This is another part of his chat with Elon Musk.
This cutter. I mean, I look at what you do. You walk in and you just say, "You want to quit?" They go on strike. I won't mention the name of the company, but they go on strike, and you say, "That's okay. You're all gone. You're all gone." So every one of you is gone, and you are the greatest. You would be very good. Oh, you would love it. But if you look at Argent, this cutter.
So he's basically talking about being cool with firing people who go on strike. He's come out. Was it today in another? Was it in the North Carolina conference or that other speech that we've seen a few excerpts from, where he was? Let's see if I can find it. Yeah, here it is. And again, think, is this the right thing to be saying to attract those, maybe white or people of color or Hispanic, all of these different demographics. What I'm trying to say is this, and the working class people in those categories, is this the right thing to say to attract those people to you, or is what you're saying divisive? So he's saying fire striking workers. Well, how does that sit with the auto union? What about this?
I don't think so. Damn possible. But they've never held a private sector job in their entire professional careers, and it's no. I don't.
So he's talking about teachers and military service members, people who haven't had private sector jobs, as if that's not a real job. Public sector jobs aren't real jobs. So he's doing everything he can to try and alienate certain members of the electorate, and it's coming back and biting him on the arse. So recently, was it UAW, United Auto Workers, the union, have filed federal labor charges against both Trump and Musk. So they recently came out and endorsed Harris, by the way, which is a really big thing for them to have done. But now they've come out and filed federal labor charges against both Trump and Musk after their interview, saying Musk and Trump threatened and intimidated workers who engaged in protected activities like strikes. It's a dangerous route to go down for Trump to do this kind of rhetoric. He just needs to be careful. He needs to be tight, and he's not. He's being carefree and getting himself in trouble. Now, again, that might play well with some of these people over there. Is it going to play well over here? How's that going to be? How's that going to sit with those union workers who would otherwise be up for voting for Trump? Maybe there are other things that really float their boat, like immigration and this and that. You start attacking the unions, you're going to start losing those people. It's just insane strategizing. I don't get it. But there you go. Now, just going back to it was the rally where you had Tim Walz and Kamala Harris. It might have been the first rally they spoke together, and they had their other halves come out and they hugged each other. But at the beginning, I think, was it Tim Walz went to shake his wife's hand, and they because they'd like anyway, and then he hugged her, and it wasn't awkward, but it was just one of those moments. Anyway, that then was picked up on by Donald Trump Jr., who then ridiculed that public affection between Walls and his wife. And then people have just gone to town, just showing montages of really Don Trump Jr. You want to start taking the Mickey out of public displays of affection when your father has been looked off by Melania Trump more times than I've had hot dinners. Just incredible, where she like refused to hold his hand there or start holding hands, and then she'll pull away. Quite often she does things like takes her hand out from his hand to like do her hair and then doesn't put it back in his hand. Just look at that. Just doesn't want to know. And there are countless examples of this, putting his hand out and she just won't take it, takes her hand away. And just time and time again, there are examples of this that so many people have picked up on previously. Of course, she's gone AWOL from the campaign. She turned up at the Republican National Committee conference and convention even, and she refused to make a speech there when JD Vance's wife made a speech. It's normal for the first ladies make or presumptive first ladies make speeches, and she didn't. And she didn't even turn up and watch anything. She only watched when Trump was down on stage. She never sat with him. And it's not looking good. So when we go back to the idea of like 40 out of 44 of the people around Trump in his last administration have not endorsed him, including his bloody vice president, is not endorsing him. All the people that really know the most about Donald Trump, the people that ran the country with him from 2016 to 2020, 40 out of 44 of them aren't endorsing him. And his wife does not look like she's endorsing him. Holy crap. Like, this is absolutely terrible. Anyway, so, what do you do when you don't have substance? We've talked about him needing substance in order to take some tangible stuff to the electorate and say, this is what I'm going to do, and this is going to make your lives better. This is good. Go back to Kamala Harris's economic plan to focus on groceries, housing, healthcare. Bish, bash, bosh. 3 things. We're going to make your lives better in these respects, and this is what we're going to do about it, and this is how we're going to do it. And we've got insulin down to $35. We can do this. We can do that. Trump, on the other hand, you always, like I've said to you for a long time now, if they're concentrating on culture wars, it means they have nothing else to talk about. There's no actual sensible policy to try and convince you of.
She wants no Merry Christmas even. I just heard today she's a big fan of fighting no Merry Christmas. No, we're going to have Merry Christmas just like we got for everybody 7 years ago. We brought it back. It was in deep trouble. We brought it back.
What has he taught? 7 years ago, Merry Christmas was in deep trouble, but we brought it back. Just what? Anyway, just culture wars nonsense. And he's in a bit of trouble as well. He keeps using music. This is not the first time this has happened. He's using Isaac Hayes' music at his rallies. As Chris Owicki says, it never fails to amuse me how political campaigns think they can use music for free without paying any heed to copyright or license fees. It doesn't work like that. Of course, Donald Trump's not very good at paying bills at the best of times. We, the family of Isaac Hayes Enterprises, represented by Walker and Associates, are suing real Donald Trump and his campaign for 134 counts copyright infringement for the unauthorized use of the song Hold On, I'm Coming at campaign rallies from 2022 to 2024. We demand the cessation of use, removal of all related videos, a public disclaimer, and payment of $3 million in licensing fees by August 16th, 2024. That is 2 days' time, by the way. Failure to comply will result in further legal action, the Hayes family. So there's possibly another $3 million of campaign revenues fundraised going to pay for something that he really should have sorted out. Now we're going to go on to a different subject here, one that is close to my heart, which is philosophy of religion. I'm a secular humanist, so I would, if I was asked this kind of question, I'd be like, I don't have a relationship with God because I don't believe she exists. But Trump is obviously, you can't. If I was running for US president, I would never get elected, right? So that's never going to happen. And also, I can't because I'm British, but I wasn't born in the US. But Trump has said he's a Christian and he's been courting the evangelical Christians. That's why he had VP Mike Pence in 2016, was to get that demographic. Remember, everything is about which category of voter you can get and how do you get them. JD Vance has got no one. It's a poor choice. Mike Pence was very important for getting the evangelicals, and he did that, and that was successful for Trump. But the problem is, Trump has no Christian knowledge himself. Like, he was asked previously, it was just so cringeworthy. What are your favorite books of the Bible? Oh, I like both of them, or whatever he said. And he's like, yeah, it was just terrible. He clearly knows nothing about the Bible. Even saying 2 Corinthians instead of 2 Corinthians, and so just simple things like that. But here, just listen to this.
Relationship with God like, and how do you pray? That's Sharon from Alabama.
Okay, so I think it's good. I do very well with the evangelicals. I love the evangelicals.
Sorry, the way he answers questions is so shite. Like, he doesn't answer questions, and I would just, if I was interviewing him and asking questions, I'd be like, I'm sorry, Mr. Trump, but that wasn't a question. Like, and it didn't make any sense. Sorry, I'm going to ask you again. Can you just answer, like, what's your relationship with God like, and how do you pray? Again, listen to what he says.
That's Sharon from Alabama.
Okay, so I think it's good.
What's your relationship with God like, and how do you pray? I think it's good. Okay, what's your relationship with God like? Okay, I think it's good. Fair enough. Sorry, that I do take that back. That does answer the question. I think it's good.
I do very well with the evangelicals.
This is next part. Like, no, that's not what I'm asking you. Like, what's your relationship with God like? I'd like you to expand on that and to tell me a little bit about your relationship with God and how do you pray, not how well you do polling with evangelicals, how much evangelicals vote for you. This is about your relationship with God.
I love the evangelicals. And I have more people saying they pray for me.
No, how do you pray? Not how many people pray for you. And, oh, isn't it wonderful? Isn't it how amazing how many people pray for me?
I can't even believe it. And they are so committed, and they're so believing. They say, sir, you're going to be okay. I pray for you every night. I mean, everybody, almost, I can't say everybody, but almost everybody that sees me, they say it. It's such a beautiful thing.
Almost everybody that sees me, they say that. No, they don't. Almost everybody that sees me. I mean, really, let's think about that. How many people see you a day? Do they really come up to you and say, sir, you're going to be okay? I pray for you He just talks bullshit the whole time. Just nothing he says is true or makes sense or answers a question or has decent substance. He will effectively twist everything to how great he is. Everything is about how big his crowds are, how wonderful he is, or how other people say how wonderful he is. That's all he's looking at doing. He must have such a complex. He must for always and ever be just wanting validation from everyone. I mean, is that narcissistic sociopathy? I don't know. What's interesting here is that evangelicals, it appears, are starting to possibly turn a little bit. Oh my, the new ad, Evangelicals for Harris, just dropped is exceptional. Simple, direct, and very compelling. More like this, please, says Charlotte Clymer. So this is an ad.
Have you been to the cross and said, Lord, I have sinned. I'm sorry for my sin. I'm willing to change my way of life.
Have you ever asked God for forgiveness? That's a tough question. I'm not sure I have. I don't bring God into that picture. I don't.
And that's pretty brutal from a theological point of view. Obviously, this isn't going to talk to people like me, right? But is there any greater denial of Christ than to say, I do not need his forgiveness? But that fits in with like, there's nobody better than me. I don't need forgiveness. Why do Trump in reality thinks he is God. So I don't bring God into that picture at all. Like, why would I be asking for forgiveness? Well, I've never done anything wrong because I'm perfect. Just yeah, that's pretty brutal. Just that little bit there, and that will speak to evangelicals. That will speak to their knowledge of forgiveness. Um, anyway, conservative writer. Fun fact: conservative writer David French here. Being interviewed by MSNBC, and is a writer at the Dispatch and other places. He ran for president. When did he run for president? I can't remember. 2012? Was it before then? Or was it 2004 even or something? Anyway, I debated him on Premier Christian Radio. He's an evangelical, and a lovely guy. We debated cancel culture. And I came at it from a secular humanist, sort of atheist point of view, and he came at it from a fundamentalist Christian point of view. But he's a really nice guy, David French. Got a lot of time for him. We completely disagree on everything in the world, but he's a decent guy and he's a nice guy. So it's fascinating that he's just come out and endorsed Harris.
Then if you've been a lifelong Republican, I've got news for you. This party is not the party you grew up with. And it's surprising to me how few people I encounter just in daily life who have fully absorbed that reality.
So you're saying you're going to vote for her. Does that send a message? If she wins and Donald Trump loses again, if Republicans potentially lose the Senate, they lose the House, you think that's going to send a message?
It will send a message. Now, who knows if it's received? There's a difference between sending a message and absorbing a message. It would absolutely send a message that the path of MAGA is a path of electoral ruin.
So this is fascinating because, and by the way, if you want to go and see my debate with him, it's on my other channel, A Tippling Philosopher. So ATP comes from my other channel, A Tippling Philosopher, ATP Geopolitics. But anyway, yeah, go and check that out. This is fascinating because he's an evangelical Christian, and you won't normally see them associating too much with the Democrats. They align because of social moral conservatism much more with the GOP. For him to come out and say, I'm going to vote for Harris is a massive thing. Now, okay, he's probably going to align more along the kind of never Trumper line. But if he takes some of those evangelicals with him, or if he is representative of a move within evangelical Christianity in the US, then this is bad news for Donald Trump. Remember, it's all about every bit of news. The lens is, what does this say about either parties or either candidates, or either nominees, success in taking some of the middle ground or some from the other side. So this is another example of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz taking some voters from the GOP. Are we seeing the Democrats lose some to the GOP, in another direction? I don't think we've seen any evidence of that in any meaningful way, but we are seeing a number of Republicans go towards Harris. Here's Michael Broadcorb, the former deputy chair of the Republican Party in Minnesota. I urge my fellow Republicans to consider that this. Supporting Harris and Walz is not about abandoning the Republican Party. It's about standing up for the principles of the party that the party once represented, principles that I believe will be at risk if Trump returns to the White House. It's exactly what David French is advocating for as well, and talking about is about that. What's happened to my old Republican Party? And there are so many Reagan Republicans and people who are morally liberal but maybe fiscally conservative, just have no home. And of course, in the two-party system, it's an issue. Now, what's important for David French here, what's important in this case, is that he's not going to not vote or vote third party. Maybe something that the other conservatives might consider doing. If you think about it, this is like Professor Gerdes. I've have conversations with him. I've had a number of times on the Ukraine war, but he's a conservative Christian, and he's of the opinion, well, in my state, it doesn't matter if I'd vote for Harris, she will never get in my state anyway. So I don't know whether that's kind of a post hoc rationalization to just stick with voting for the GOP, even though he really despises Trump, or whether he'll vote third party. But my opinion is that if you get, I guess, 1 point if a Republican votes third party, or vice versa for Democrat, and you get 2 points if they not only don't vote for the Republicans but do vote for you, for the Democrats. So yeah, it's good if they don't vote for the GOP, but it's even better if they don't vote for the GOP and vote for you, and that's what David French is doing, which is quite a ballsy move there. Now, Nikki Haley, who herself was running for the nominee for the Republicans, has then thought that she'll be in a political wilderness. So she then eventually, even though she said, I don't know how anyone can vote for Trump, he'll be a danger to the US, everything she said on the campaign trail that was excoriating Trump evidently means nothing, because she then came and endorsed him, and then had to do this mental gerrymandering to make that in any form justifiable. But here she is actually being a bit brutal about Trump's campaign. So she's endorsed Trump, but now she's saying the campaign is not doing a good job.
That's not happening now? Do you think that this campaign is floundering on that point?
I want this campaign to win. But the campaign is not going to win talking about crowd sizes. It's not going to win talking about what race Kamala Harris is. It's not going to win talking about whether she's dumb. It's not. You can't win on those things. The American people are smart. Treat them like they're smart.
Do you think that?
Which is absolutely right. What are you doing talking about crowd sizes and Kamala Harris's ethnicity? And this is not going to win you the election. Stop just trying to talk about your base. And it's interesting. I was looking down my sort of thread of what to talk about, the many things that I am talking about, and one of the chyrons that was, or the this is it. I don't know where this is coming from, RSBN, but anyway, the description of this talk that he gives, where they applauded him on I think it's that climate change thing, wasn't it? No, about wind turbines. Trump energizes MAGA base. That sums everything up for me in terms of the campaign. Yeah, okay, you're energizing your base. What are you doing about everyone else? Because your base will not get you an electoral victory. And here we've got over 60,000 Republicans join the Republicans for Harris call tonight. So there's a big Zoom call or Twitter space, I'm not sure. The dam is breaking. Republicans and independents are abandoning Donald Trump. This is huge. Now, I don't know if you can say that much, but it is significant. And we're seeing this movement from the GOP to the Democrats in a way that we're not seeing from the Democrats to the GOP. That is huge. Right, we're going to go on to a bit of VP talk, mainly on Vance. And again, remember, it's all about what is this person or these people doing to win over those people in the middle. Remember, JD Vance here.
Voted for Joe Biden should be ashamed of themselves. I want to move on.
But he's made similar comments about a lot of different groups of people, Dana. I don't think anybody could look at the presidency and the conduct of Donald Trump and say, this is a person who's somehow anti-Semitic. And I think whether you're Jewish or not, you should be looking at the record of Joe Biden.
He had dinner with Nick Fuentes, who is an avowed anti-Semite.
Dana, you should look at the record of Joe Biden and recognize.
Yeah.
So he just ignores that point. But my goodness, Dana Bash, she's coming up with some crackers at the moment. Nick Fuentes is a white supremacist, right? Okay, majorly anti-Semitic. And Trump has courted those people before, David Duke, other people, or have courted him, and he's accepted their praise. He had dinner with Nick Fuentes, How could anyone say he's anti-Semitic? Well, going to lunch with that dude, or going to dinner with that dude is, I would say, borderline anti-Semitic. So I love this from Michael Weiss. is there a constituency this guy, JD Vance, hasn't alienated before November? If so, let me know. I mean, here, I'm not going to play you all of this, but this is some unearthed audio where JD Vance says he agrees, quote, that the whole purpose of the postmenopausal female is to help raise grandchildren, and that helping raise children is a, quote, weird, unadvertised feature of marrying an Indian woman. He's married to an Indian woman. Yeah, it just says just weird things that are not going to attract those people in these different demographic segments that the GOP really need. JD Vance on a Fox News interview says it's not normal. Well, I'll let you
One of
hear.
my dear friends tonight said to me, well, all these suburban women, all they care about is abortion, and they don't understand that decision is with the states now. It's not banned nationally, even if some people want it to be banned nationally. It's with the states. What do you say to suburban women out there who are marinating in this propaganda?
Marinating in that, I won't have a rant about Laura Ingraham here and how she's asking such jilted leading questions here that just completely belie any kind of journalistic integrity. But there you go.
Well, first of all, I don't buy that, Laura. I think most suburban women care about the normal things that most Americans care about, right?
Senator,
So I don't think most suburban women care about reproductive rights. I think they care about normal things instead. Now, we know that reproductive rights is a huge issue for suburban women. And so to just flippantly dismiss it as not a normal thing is, again, what's that doing? To stop playing to your base. Yeah, you've got them. Yep, okay. These people over here, is that kind of rhetoric going to land well? Is it going to sit well? No. And I love this. So I talked earlier about how the Harris Waltz campaign staff are producing, or the PR people are producing, these absolute diamonds on a daily basis. As Charlotte Clymer says, I love this comms team so much. Harris Waltz for immediate release. August 14th, 2024. Days since JD Vance insulted women across America. 0. It's a day ending in Y, which means yet another day of JD Vance and his Project 2025 agenda being an absolute menace on womankind. The internet is literally begging JD to be normal. Just absolutely excoriating of JD Vance, but in a really fun kind of humorous way. They're doing a great job, I think, the comms team there. And then JD Vance, like, wow, says Adam Kinzinger, former Republican lawmaker, what a disaster. So look at the huge crowd waiting for JD Vance. This is apparently 10 minutes before JD Vance's speech. Just incredible. Oh no, he then goes on. Actually, there's a correction here. This is an hour before. Fair enough. But point for me would be, that how many seats are there? So an hour before, okay, there's only about 20 odd people there, maybe 30 people. That's seats for what, 100 people, 200 people? I'd guess if Tim Walz was speaking, and we saw another campaign stop last week that I showed you, and that someone with a mobile phone just went and ran as he was speaking, and there were fewer people than there are there. Just absolutely terrible. It just is not the right choice. He was not the right choice for Donald Trump. Now, here we have a fascinating article, I think, about Tim Walz, a former student of Tim Walz here, and I really want to read this to you. How am I doing for time? Not well. Go and read this. Former Walz student, dormant Republican, has a warning. Basically, a former student who says he's Republican or voted more times Republican than Democrat, and he basically so don't be fooled by the easy smile and cheesy dad jokes. When the chips are down and things get hard, this guy sticks to his convictions. He doesn't move his support to whichever group yells his name the loudest. This article is all about like his experiences with Mr. Walz and after 9/11 as well, and Waltz showing his colors and just being a really good teacher, etc., etc. He doesn't take the politically easy route. He actually believes the things that are coming out of his mouth, whether you agree with him or not. When he's not on TV talking, he is working to make his policies reality. Waltz digs in. It's the reason for why, for years, students sought his counsel about hard things when he was a teacher at Mankato West. It's why he was able to turn the first congressional district blue for a decade, and it's why he ran successfully to the right of a DFL endorsed candidate to win the Democratic nomination for governor in 2018. So people on the GOP side are claiming he's this firebrand liberal, but actually, when you look at his voting record, especially going back a little further, he was actually on the right hand side of the Democratic Party for many things. So he's not quite what he's painted as being by the GOP. Memo to the Trump 2024 team, this guy continues, from a dormant Republican and a Mr. World student. Make the campaign about the Trump tax policy. Make it about China. Make it about the border. Make it about anything other than leadership, decency, and competency. Because if you don't, and this becomes a character debate, you're way out of your league. That is basically a massive character endorsement of Tim Walz. Interesting stuff. Now let's get on to polls to finish this off because I've been rambling for too long. Okay. July voter registration. Republicans plus 252,794. Democrats minus 19,088. Now, this looks like super bad news for the Democrats. And prima facie it is, right? The Republicans making huge gains there. Democrats not looking good at all. But one must remember this is in July, and we had the when was it exactly that Biden dropped out? Well, actually, let's go and look at this from the New York Times, but on Yahoo News. Recent voter registration data offers a hint of enthusiasm for Democrats. So basically, this looks to be a trend that has been a result of Biden's decreasing popularity that led to Republicans getting more and more registered voters, and also the week of the Republican convention. But as soon as the convention was over, then the Democrats took a big plus in these columns here. So at the moment, they are looking pretty good. So Pennsylvania, North Carolina, these are real battleground states there. So it's not all as it seems quite from this data. And the other thing to notice here is that 40% of that data comes from California. So California taking 94,000 extra 95,000 pretty much registrations for the Republicans and minus 43,000 for the Democrats in California. But that's a state that's never going to go red, right? So you can forget that and reduce that by 40%. And so there are different ways of looking at that, but it's going to be what goes on, what takes place since this data was compiled. So August, September, October, and there are claims that lots of registrations are coming through for the Democrats, and it's also going to be super important as to what Taylor Swift does. So we know that 4 years ago, Taylor Swift, her endorsement led to her call for people to register to vote, caused a massive swell for particularly young people, and we know that young people skew Democrats. So that is going to be interesting to see. And I think, is it 80% of first-time voters vote as well? So it really does. That should, if Taylor Swift, especially if she actually endorses Harris, like formally, then that could be huge. And people are talking about whether she's actually going to do that. In North Carolina, Republicans plus 6,294, Democrats minus 722. So that's an important state that's not going to look good at the moment. However, that's July voter registration change, but things are looking good in North Carolina outside of that. So the North Carolina general election poll from YouGov, so it's an A-rated pollster, has Harris on 46, Trump on 46, with Harris just ahead there, and that is, I think that's what that blue dot there means. That is a really significant change. I mean, North Carolina, if the Democrats have that in their sights, then it's if they get North Carolina, then you can assume they're going to get places like Pennsylvania. North Carolina coming back into play is really remarkable, says Phillips O'Brien. A stunning turnaround in the Cook battleground surveys between May and today. North Carolina has gone from Trump +8 to Harris +2. Pennsylvania from Trump +3 to Harris +5. Arizona from Trump +4 to Harris +4. Of course, given how Trump outperformed polling in 16 and 20, this is very much a jump ball. So, one must beware of the polling, right? But then there's also the claim that many young people who are just registering and have never voted will not feature. And so that might skew back towards Democrats. So more polls out show Harris has a large lead in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. If she carries all three, she should win the election, says Phillips O'Brien. So again, looking good in some of these battleground states, Harris. Michigan poll recap from political polls here saying, looking at all different polls. So Bullfinch has Harris up 5, Siena has Harris up 4, Trafalgar, Trafalgar really Republican pollster, really pro-Republican, and they skew towards Republican, has Harris up 2, Redfield, Trump up 1, and Morning Consult Harris up 11 in Michigan. 538 has Harris up 3.3%, so that's an average, and RCP, Real Clear Politics, has Harris up 2.4%. Polymarket, so it's a betting averages, has a Harris 65% chance in Michigan. So it's looking really good in that battleground state. In fact, those forecasts chance of winning, as we just seen, Harris 66.5% in Michigan, that's up 33. Wisconsin 64%, up 28 from Trump. Harris 59%, up 18 from Trump in Pennsylvania, and Nevada. Harris is up 8 on Trump at 54%. So it's all looking good for the betting markets, and they are sometimes seen as the much better guide to what might actually happen, because that's where people put their money. And a polling average from Nate Silver, so 538, the creator of 538. Harris is 46.8. That's up 3.1 on Trump at 43.7. So looking better and better for Harris. You can see that trend line just going, we go back to the end of July where it switched over. Biden dropped out, 21st of July. So when we look at the registrations, remember, that's July registrations. But after, the key is what happens after Biden drops out. What are the registrations doing here? Have people been enthused to register? And the data that I think came out from Harris starting that campaign and doing all of those Zoom calls and rallies and whatnot, I think the registrations did really pick up. Then we have the Nate Silver model, the Electoral College. So this is what he predicts, or 538 predict, as the Electoral College votes for the different states and how many Electoral College, how many electors they have. Has Harris on 283 to Trump's 255. So at the moment, looking like Harris is going to have a fairly decisive victory. And then favorability ratings, Trump is down 7, Vance is down 9, Harris is up 2, Walz is up 11. Walz is plus 20 on Vance, and Harris is plus 9 on Trump. This is huge. So CNN talking about that there. But that's I won't go and play you that, but that's really significant. I am going to play you this. This is hugely important.
We know, obviously, you look at the overall polls, you see these swing state polls, the ones over the weekend from Siena did stand out. We'll see if that's really where this goes. But you found something very interesting in terms of one group that stands out.
White working class voters, white voters without a college degree. That is Donald Trump's core group. That was the reason why he was able to break down that giant blue wall, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, in the Great Lakes. And look at their support now versus where we were a few months ago when the matchup was between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Look, Donald Trump still leads, but look at that margin. It has shrunk significantly. It was 25 points back in May. It is now 14 points now here in August, nearly been sliced by half. Those numbers that Harris is putting up amongst that group right now are actually slightly better than Joe Biden did 4 years ago amongst those voters in those key states. Those are the types of numbers that Kamala Harris needs to put up in order to win. And, of course, Joe Biden was like, I don't want to drop out of the race because I'm not sure that Kamala Harris can break in with this group, but it turns out she absolutely can.
Which is fascinating because originally when they started, right, it was an immediate map expansion. They started looking at Georgia, North Carolina even, not giving up, but it seemed like sort of accepting that conventional wisdom. And now it's fascinating that may not be the case. So also the economy. When we look at that, were talking about that. That's an issue Trump has been extremely strong on. Is that changing?
It is. I mean, again, look, we're still looking at Trump having a clear advantage amongst white working class voters in, the Great Lake battleground states. But again, the margin is shrinking, and elections are all about margins. You see it shrinking. He had a 36-point advantage in May. It's now down to 24 points here in August. These are the types of numbers that Kamala Harris needs to put up. And more than that, it's about the economy. This is also a change election, and it's also about change as well. And she's breaking through among white working class voters on the issue of change. So the economy and change working for her cohesively.
You're talking about Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. There, obviously, those are crucial. That's that blue wall. But when you look more broadly, does this tip the scale as you look at other crucial must-win states?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Non-college whites are a key group across the board. They are a plurality of voters in the electorate when you compare them with college-educated whites or if you compare them with African Americans and Hispanics, and especially in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. Look at that. They're the majority of voters. The fact that Harris is closing in on Trump with them is the big reason why she has those advantages she has now in those New York Times Siena College
Absolutely
polls.
Fascinating. So Harris.
So that's really good news for the Harris campaign, but still, challenges ahead. It's early days; lots can happen. But I guess the TLDR for me is that the Trump campaign, Trump and Vance, are still not doing anything at all to attract people that they need to attract in the center or from the Democrats or from these key demographics to put them over the line, to have Trump become the next president. I've spoken to a number of people since I've been here on holiday, who speaking to an English guy today who was like, "Who do you think is going to win?" And I was like, to be honest, as it stands at the moment, this is Harris's to lose. Trump is doing nothing to attract those middle voters. But yeah, so I don't think there's anything we've seen from all of what's happened in the last week or since I did my last update that has shown that Trump is changing his strategy to adapt. Now, if is truly going to sack his campaign managers, if that is Wiles and Lasavita, those are the people that actually know what they're talking about and want him to stick to the straight and narrow. And he's going off on one and doing his own kind of rally, rambling speeches. And if he's trying to get rid of them for trying to keep him on the straight and narrow, then he's going to have even less chance of winning, in my opinion, if that actually comes through. But anyway, let me know what you guys think. I know this has been a super long one. Thanks so much for putting up with me rambling on and picking all these bits and pieces out for you. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.